Hi everyone, I'm Pastor Lou. Thanks for joining us today at the Online Daily Bible. We're glad you're watching. Today's Bible reading is 2 Corinthians 10, verses 1 through 18. Give a listen.
I, Paul, myself entreat you, by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I, who am humble when face to face with you, but bold toward you when I am away. I beg of you that when I am present I may not have to show boldness, with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of walking according to the flesh. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. Look at what is before your eyes. If anyone is confident that he is Christ's, let him remind himself that just as he is Christ's, so also are we. For even if I boast a little too much of our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up and not for destroying you, I will not be ashamed. I do not want to appear to be frightening you with my letters. For they say, his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak, and his speech of no account. Let such a person understand that what we say by letter when absent, we do when present. Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. But we will not boast beyond limits, but will boast only with regard to the area of influence God assigned to us, to reach even to you. For we are not overextending ourselves as though we did not reach you. For we were the first to come all the way to you with the gospel of Christ. We do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others, but our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged, so that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you without boasting of work already done in another's area of influence. Let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends.
Well, so as we've just heard in this section of 2 Corinthians, there's a lot going on here. And so what is God saying and through Paul, and what is he saying to the Corinthians? So as we know, some of the problems that Paul was having in the Corinthian church was that they were disregarding his authority over them. They were not viewing him as their apostle. They were not viewing him as one who had spiritual authority over them. And the reason is because they were comparing Paul to these other apostles, as we've heard about in the past, as we've been reading, these, what he refers to as super apostles. And so these are people that were drawing attention to themselves. They were very good at speaking. They had a lot of power. They talked about visions that they had received. And we don't know a lot about their message. However, we do know that they were drawing people away from Jesus. And so the Corinthians were not seeing that. They didn't realize that that's what was going on. And so then as they got kind of drawn into these super apostles and their outward appearance, Paul took issue with that, and rightly so. The reason is, we're going to see this today and actually again tomorrow, is that the Corinthians were judging, if you will, from outward appearances. So they were looking at what they saw on the outside. They weren't really listening to the message. They weren't listening to the content of what was being said. So even though Paul self-admittedly says, even though I'm unskilled in speech, which I wonder about that, because we know from Paul's life before coming to Christ that he was a Pharisee among Pharisees. He was a Hebrew among Hebrews, and we'll actually see that the next day or two. But he lowered himself so that Christ could be exalted. And in verse 7, he says this to them: look at what is before your eyes. Now, there's a number of ways you could take that, but the way that Paul meant this was, look at what is before your eyes. Look around you. Look at what's going on. And what he meant by that was saying, look at the church that exists in the city of Corinth. Take a look at that. That is the fruit of my ministry. That's what Paul was saying. I have authority given by God, by the will of God. I have authority over you, and it produces fruit in your life and in the life of the church. And he's saying, look what's before your eyes. And so when we think about this, we can fall into a trap, okay? And I think for us, we want to really be considering, what does this mean to us? What is it that, Paul's saying to the Corinthians that applies to us today? And I think one of the ways that we can apply this is to really ask ourselves a very simple question. As we are viewing the landscape around us, as we're viewing the Christian, world, there's a lot of voices, right? I mean, here you are on YouTube. Gosh, there's so many people on YouTube right now. And they may have slick productions, and they may look great and speak well, but what's the message? And so here's what I would say. I would say to you, you can either judge by outward appearance, or you can become curious. Now, when you become curious, what you do is you ask questions. And so a great question to ask as you are listening to the landscape, as you're listening to all the voices that are around you, is, what is their message? What are they saying? And are they exalting Jesus, or are they exalting themselves? Remember, these super apostles, they said, look at me. They were out for what the Corinthians could give to them. But Paul is saying, look at Christ. And he's looking out for them, for their eternal well-being. He's looking out for them, for what really matters. And so, ask yourself the question, what are they saying? What's the message? And are they exalting Jesus? And that's what I want to leave you with here today. Thanks for listening and watching.